All right, here we are, ready for an episode of Thoughts on Talks, where we're going to delve into not only Reverend Mike's Sunday talk at Centers for Spiritual Living in Granada Hills for what was the date yesterday? September 6th, because today's Labor Day, which is the official launch day of Reverend Mike's book, Blue Collar Spirituality, Finding a God That Works.
Yay,
Michael McMorrow. And that's a drill, and that's wood, because he's a carpenter, like Jesus. So I like that you chose Labor Day as your launch day.
Yeah.
Because it's about laborers. So one thing that occurred to me in listening to your talk, and then in also reading it in the prologue of the book, is what is the difference between a redneck and a roughneck and a blue neck, which you also mention?
Oh, I don't know. I suppose a redneck is. I suppose they're all sort of the same thing, although you can be blue collar and not be a redneck.
I think of redneck as because people are working outside and maybe bending down, nose to the grindstone, doing their work, that the sun reddens their neck.
Right. And maybe because they don't have a collar on their shirt.
Ah, collars. I don't have a collar either. But it's
blue collar, blue collar, I think, really has been since in the 1930s, right? Those would have been like guys who had, and it would be men, who had manufacturing jobs. Of course, many more people were on the farm then, right? So, and it was an actual color of a shirt, right? It was a cotton shirt that was dyed that color. So, yeah.
And would this be like the group of people Bruce Springsteen sings for, is blue collar people?
Say, yeah, I mean, it's just, those folks out there who working, and there's a level of toil, right? So in the modern era, I mean, I don't know how they would think of themselves, but delivery guys, I would say, are probably blue collar today. A lot of our service jobs are.
Yeah.
And of course, the construction guys, those are the plumbers, electricians, carpenters,
who are actually working with their hands, with materials.
Right. Well, even the, like set carpenters, set dressers, anybody in the crafts union that has anything to do with show business. I don't know how they consider themselves, but to me, those probably fit in the category. So there's certainly not as many, quote, blue collar jobs as there once were. Because, that's what everybody's carrying on about now, right? A lot of those jobs got shipped out when they convinced everybody that the American worker needed to compete with third world countries in order to be their companies to be profitable. And instead, all they did was lose their jobs.
Yeah.
So, and then China controls all the stuff now. Yay! Great job, you guys. Thanks for thinking ahead for us.
So for anybody who hasn't been following along through the process of you writing your book, which when I first met you, it was probably a little over 2 years ago. And you mentioned to me that you were thinking of writing a book. And so from the time I met you to now, it's great to see somebody who's talking about writing a book actually doing it and publishing it, because that's, lots of people take notes and gather them and set them aside. Few people actually work with an editor and put it together. And even fewer people actually take those final steps to send it out into the world with the graphics and the cover and the information on the back. I mean, those are important steps that often don't get done. So congratulations to you for actually doing what you said you were going to do.
Well,
I applaud you.
As always, there's a story to such things.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is my second attempt at this book. So the first attempt, I think I started in maybe 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
And I had several pages, maybe, I don't know, 50 or 60 pages. But it really talked a lot more about what blue collar versus white collar is, and so on and so forth. And it talked, because what I was wanting to do was use building as a metaphor for rebuilding your life. Mm-hmm. But I kind of wrote myself into a corner, right? Because they say, oh, write an outline and blah, blah, blah. Well, you know, if I knew how to do all that, you know, I'd have gone to college, but, you know. But I don't know, I could not, for whatever reason, I couldn't really outline it. So anyway, I had a bunch of pages. I was working with another development editor, and she really loved it. But there was a lot of heavy rewrite going on, and I just realized that it really I wasn't going to end up with what I thought I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was like a lot of things in life, right? So that I'm not exactly sure what I want, but I know that this isn't it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happened was I was at one of my ministerial conferences, and Dr. Christian Sorensen, who's the minister down at Seaside, CSL Seaside in Encinitas, he just said, you know, Michael, just get yourself an editor, right? You've got a bunch of pages. You kind of, you know, purged out a bunch of stuff. Get yourself an editor. A good editor can get you to the finish line. And that's really been some of the best advice, along with the CSL Writers Boot Camp. So Jim Terrell and Lee Pound have developed a macro in Word, and they take you through a process. And so instead of writing the book in a linear way, what it does is it helps you build it. So almost kind of like the inside out. And so, and what that did was so the outline kind of presented itself, but it wasn't an outline. It was a table of contents.
Ah.
Right? And so then, and you know, I only wrote for like 6 minutes at a time through their writing exercises. So at the end of 4 days, I had at least, I had a good rough draft.
You had like the skeleton of things, and then you filled out all the soft parts before you put
right. And then, but even then, you know, Christian's words came back to me, because I still needed some editorial help. So I shared what I had, but I was very careful about that this time because of my experience the first time. Okay. Because I wasn't interested in having an English assignment.
Okay.
Right. And I just wanted to I just wanted to kind of get it out of me and get it over with.
Right.
Because it's kind of like when you have a project that you've been talking about. And so I read one of Angela Carroll Brown's, a couple of her books. But one of them, The Assassination of Gabriel Champion, which is kind of a dark book. It's surprisingly dark for the person that Angela is, but the writing was really good in it. And for those of departure.
But for people who are watching who don't know Angela, she is part of the music team, or has been for quite some time, at the Center for Spiritual Living in Granada Hills. And she's now moved to Kansas City, but because we're in a pandemic and are doing everything by Zoom, we still get to see her pretty regularly, which is wonderful. And
Right.
she's, a musician and an author and a poet and a painter. And she's just really this amazing creative person who has done the work that you're describing. She's published several books.
I think she has 5 books.
Mm-hmm. And some are poetry, but some are novels.
Correct.
And so she certainly would be able to, and her voice, her written voice is so clear, and she's been through that process so often that she would be the perfect person. And because you had a rapport also, she's your friend. She's somebody from your spiritual community.
I also think it was, she's also a jazz musician.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a nice quality, because improvisation is such a huge part of jazz.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that I was doing and the way that I was writing was kind of riffing. And then I also want to give a shout out to Dr. Maureen Hoyt, right? So she has a class, Writing for Fun and Profit.
Mm-hmm.
But she helped tighten up a lot of things too. So they helped me get it to the finish line. But Angela was really great because she is self-published, so she took care of all the stuff. She took care of the graphics, the cover art, the back cover. Okay, and then checklists. Okay, now you need this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my intention to have this thing finished in June, because I had been invited to speak at the Canadian New Thought Conference. And so I was hoping to have a rollout there. But then, of course, this bloody pandemic hit.
And then 2020. I mean, it's everything. 2020.
But I had everything. Gosh, I probably had it 90% done.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'll tell you what else happened is Nikki Robbins, one of our members and now new minister,
mm-hmm.
Her mom, Margie, is a big part of our center.
Mm-hmm.
And I happened to know that her son had some laptops from an office that he had closed. So I just asked if I could buy one. I figured, I'd get a good deal on it.
Mm-hmm.
And he donated it to me instead.
Nice.
So the only thing I have on the laptop is stuff like this, the Zoom stuff, and the writing stuff. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And because what I also found, for whatever reason, it doesn't make any sense, but the place that I was most productive in writing was at a Starbucks or some place that was semi-public.
Okay.
So that people were around, but they weren't bothering me, and I could look around and people watch a little bit, and then, I could sit for a couple hours at a time. But
that's important. That's important to identify, like what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and to be honest with yourself about that.
Right. So anyway, it did kind of happen, and then we had the shutdown where we couldn't go anywhere for 2 weeks. And then, so that allowed me to get that last 10% push done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just make myself get up early and work on it. And finally, here we are. Thank you. I mean, really, I can't thank Angela enough, because she just kept nudging and, not pushing, but just kind of nudging.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I would send her some, oh, this is really good, keep it coming, right? So that would be enough, input for me to, because I'm not naturally a writer. I'm far better at talking than I am at writing.
And they really are. I mean, it seems like they would be the same thing. And if you're a minister and you're writing a talk every week, it seems like it would translate. But it's different because when you're writing for a spoken thing, you're using a different part of your voice. When you're writing prose or something that needs to read in your head, it is a different thing.
Yeah. And my son Michael is all, now he is a writer.
Okay.
And he kept telling me exactly that, Dad, you got to strip it. You got to keep stripping it because it just, because in your natural speech, you use a lot more adverbs,
Mm-hmm.
a lot more adverbs than you would in writing. And so a lot of the work, and Dr. Maureen was great about this too, it's just about stripping out all that stuff. So the book does read pretty fast, and I'm happy for that. And some input that I got from a publisher was that it was a little too jargony. So I went through and I tried some of it you can't avoid, but
was it carpenter jargon or religious science jargon? Okay.
It was both, yeah.
Okay.
So, and in both cases, of course, when you're familiar with the terms, it's tougher to identify it.
Right.
So, but I've had some great input. I've only had 3 folks post on Amazon.
So far, it's only been a few days.
Yeah, I know. Well, no, it's been, I've actually sent books around. I've had books in circulation now for about 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
So,
so anybody watching this, please,
yeah, if you've read it and you don't think it sucks,
yeah.
Or, and I got to tell you, if someone, I really like the book, except,
right.
I mean, you want to hear that stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's not the next chapter of the Bible. Let's put it that way. And I don't think it's going to be included in the canon of religious science anytime soon. But I think I think this is a good assessment of the book is that, and I'm hoping it finds a market for helping people who are like brand new to the teaching to explain the basic principles. But it doesn't even have to be that, if it finds enough of a readership to help working people who are super busy, busting their ass every day, right? Barely freaking making it. And and they're just, I know what it's like to hump your ass all day and feel like you're not getting anywhere, and if this helps them find a way to get some traction and to just identify the ways that we get in our own way.
Yeah.
Right. And then to use spiritual power, however, that to be like a higher power idea that is infinite in nature and is wildly creative. In fact, it's its nature to be creative. That with a conscious effort, we can tap into that, and we can shift the tendency of our thinking enough until eventually you can shift your whole gig if that's what you choose to do. I mean, I took these classes starting with, principles like this, and, I ended up in ministry, which is really weird because I did not set out. This was not something I set out to do. But I do remember thinking, because I never really had an issue with God. I had some resentments about the way I understood it to be. And I kind of speak to this in the book a little bit, right? Well, if you're willing to unpack that, because it takes two things. One, you have to explore, but you have to explore with a commitment that you're not going to give up until you get on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So if you come from a traditional mindset, you run the risk of, quote, losing your faith. Right.
But sometimes, I mean, in my experience, when I've lost my faith, that helps me rebuild it in a way that's more authentic for me, because it strips away all the things.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's transformational.
Right.
And that's that is real power that you can use.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings a depth to life that has connection in it that really counts.
Mm-hmm.
That you become, I don't know if you think this is so for you, but I found that I was experiencing a lot more love in my life as soon as I detached it from having to get it from one woman. Right. And I don't mean like, sleeping around. I mean, just being a much more open-hearted person and just really enjoying my exchanges with people as they happened. So, you kind of become a friend to yourself. By becoming a friend to yourself, you become a friend of the world, I think. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
Right. And then your working life then becomes an extension of that. And so then that gets easier.
Yes.
And then the stuff, the money kind of finds its way there. I haven't been laying golden eggs, that's for sure. But I'm debt free. I have some money in the bank. I actually have a 401k, right?
That's cool. Yeah.
And before it was just busting my ass trying to keep my business going, and every dollar got reinvested into that.
Yeah.
And, which seemed like a pretty good strategy until 2008.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the other impetus of my first time out, because I was actually kind of writing about how, when I started out in the trades in the late 70s, part of the blue collar experience was every time the interest rates clicked up a notch, you were out of work. And that held true really until the Gulf War.
Wow.
And then something about the Gulf War, I don't know if they were just used. There was just a lot of, they just flooded the economy with money. And that's kind of what caused the 2008 collapse. They'd have clicked it back the way they had done in the past and say 2003 and 2006 or something, just put the brakes on a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about these things. All I know is that blue collar used to be when the interest rates would go up, the economy would slow down, construction spending would drop, and then you'd be hustling again. So if this book can help those kind of folks, then it will have served its purpose. And and also if I can get, the money that I have invested in, putting it together, that would be nice too.
Just break even.
But it's not necessary. I can tie to the universe if necessary.
Yes. Yeah. So, like I said, the prologue of the book is the talk that you gave yesterday, Sunday, September 6th. So anybody who doesn't have the book yet and wants to check out the talk, go to the Center for Spiritual Living Granada Hills YouTube channel, which is probably where you're watching this, and look for that talk, and you'll see it, which is a recreation of a talk you gave to a much larger live audience at Asilomar. So our tech team at the center inserted canned laughter because you didn't have 500 people in the audience, and it's a different energy, as you
Yeah.
found in the pandemic, to talk to like 6 people than 500.
Yeah. But
Yes.
it's I was wanting to share that talk with our community,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I don't know why we just didn't last year. It's for those of you who don't know. So this was supposed to have been a retreat at Asilomar. It's something that our organization did every summer for, I don't know, ages, maybe 50, 70 years. I don't know, a long time.
Wow.
And then when we integrated, as it happened, the Asilomar Conference Center privatized. And so they contracted the whole gig out to Aramark. And when that happened, it jacked up the price of the, what do you want to say, the deposit. It doubled the cost of the deposit. So what that meant was organizationally, we would have had to tie up a couple $100,000 for a year.
Wow.
Yeah. So we just opted to not do that. We didn't want to tie up that kind of capital.
Mm-hmm.
So it had doubled, so at 100, it was, feasible. At 200, it wasn't. So, so we lost that. So this was the first time. So I was supposed to just be speaking in the chapel. So I don't know if you've ever been up there. It's quite a beautiful place. Julia, the gal who designed Hearst Castle, Julia Morgan.
Okay.
Julia Morgan, the first woman architect in the state of California.
Cool.
So she designed a lot of the buildings there. And It's funny, as a builder, I spotted it because I'd been to Hearst Castle, but I hadn't been to Asilomar before. And as soon as I went into Merrill Hall, I went, oh, this is the same architect. It's got to be.
There were pictures that were shown on the slide, showed during your talk. So that's the first time I had seen what it really looked like.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to try, the organization, I believe, is going to try and go back there every other year. So the next time you can, make sure you go. It's because, for one thing, it's held in August, like this time of year, August. And there it's like cool and sometimes even cold. And it's just so refreshing to get away.
It's in Central California, or is it not that far?
Well, it's right on the coast near Monterey.
Oh, okay.
Pacific Grove. Yeah. So it's foggy in the morning, and it's funny. Everybody's like, oh, it's so cold. And I'm like, oh, yeah, bring it on.
Well, you worked in the Seattle area, right? Washington State for a while.
For a while, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but this is the area this is also where Ernest Holmes spoke. And so to be asked to speak there, right? So we went from the chapel, and then they said, can you do it? And I said, yeah, sure. And I prepared it and blah, blah, blah. And I just happened to say to Dr. Pat Campbell in an email like a week beforehand, something about the chapel. And she said, oh, no, honey, you're going to be in Merrill Hall. I was like, gulp. Yeah, so it's a big honor. It's a big honor to be asked. And, of course, I was nervous wreck, mostly because so many people who mean a lot to me were there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do well. I wanted to do well for our center.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, but then.
Well, you did send me the audio recording of it. So I got to hear that a while back. And so I could hear the authentic laughter of the crowd, because the person recording it, I could tell, was like maybe halfway back through the audience, or at least 3 or 4 rows, because I listen for things like that. So I really got the surround sound of the laughter from where it was being recorded. So I know at least the feel of it from from hearing it.
It was great. And it was a home run. I would have been happy with a double, but it was a walk-off homer, really. It was great. The energy was great.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the humor that got injected into that talk was just spontaneous, just me kind of hamming it up in the moment. And
I think that's why it, even reading it in the book and hearing you re-perform it yesterday, I think that's why it feels so authentic, is because it's just the way you talk and it's your story.
Yeah.
The recovering redneck story. Confessions of a Recovering Redneck is what you called that
Well,
talk?
I called it Spirituality and the Recovering Redneck.
Okay.
And the theme was on holy ground.
Mm.
And so the story actually evolved out of the story that I told about the time when I was a kid in the Sierras, when I came upon that Sierra Grove.
Mm.
And, still to this day, I mean, that is my touchstone to the transcendent, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, it's not necessary to go anywhere to have that kind of experience. But even still today, it feels like oftentimes I must go up the mountain, right? Like Moses, I got to go up the mountain, right? Take my shoes off, and
Yeah, people, throughout history have built their religious edifices up as high up a mountain as you can get. And it's because something in us understands that sense of elevating ourselves and maybe taking a broader view, but it's something inherent in humanity that wants that. So I can totally understand. We want to be a little closer to the clouds and the sun. And when the description in the book of that moment, I find myself taking a deep breath, and it's the language of it is beautiful, but also the pictures in my head, because I'm someone who also connects with the transcendence of nature, the natural cathedral of trees and flowers and all of that. So I just find myself going, even as I read just that short little paragraph.
Yeah, good.
Really lovely.
That's great. I'm delighted to hear it.
Well, it's very exciting.
Good editing will get you.
What?
That's what good editing gets you.
Yes. So, and I notice at the end of each section, there's a toolbox. I don't know if you can see. Nope, can't see it. A place like a workbook to kind of jot down some of your own thoughts, answer some questions, because sometimes that's the best way to pull something out of ourselves, is to just answer a question that's been posed to us. So I think that's great. And
anyone who's ever done these kinds of classes, either through Science of Mind or Landmark or something like that, these will be kind of wading pool questions versus the deep end. But that is by design, right?
You got to start somewhere.
Well, and I just had the busy reader in mind who doesn't really have the time to maybe sign up for, let's say, a Science of Mind class for 3 hours a night for 8 weeks. Right. And let's face it, that 3 hours takes 5 hours to do, because you got to get there, got to get class, then you got to get home. Right.
Yeah. So pre-pandemic.
Now for me, I love that. I ate that stuff up. I really did. So for me, well, obviously, because I ended up where I'm at, but but I just really enjoyed the puzzle of the nature of God and how it shows up. And but then the idea of Ernest Holmes calling it a power that you could use, that's something that never really occurred to me. Right.
Yeah.
So before, the only thing you could really use it for was to save your ass from burning for eternity. That was about it.
Hopefully,
and,
yeah, you would hope that
the cosmic tumblers just right. You might get free of a health diagnosis, or get out of a jam of some kind. But this was a different approach, right? So in the same way that electricity is a power that we can use, right? But until we build an electric motor and put a skill saw blade on it and a trigger, it's just electricity until we figure out, oh, I can cut a board with this. And if I can cut a board, enough of them, I can build a building. Right? But before that, electricity always existed. I think Holmes even talks about that. It existed at the time of the caveman.
Yeah.
And, and instead they were on a quest for fire, never mind electricity.
Right, exactly.
Or Wi-Fi.
Lightning is probably what lit the first fire that the cavemen found and used, and that's lightning is electricity.
It's a little before your time, but you've probably seen that movie, Quest for Fire.
Yes.
It's like one of my all-time favorite movies.
Really?
Yes, I just love imagining that what early man was like.
I know you like history. My love for history rarely goes back that far.
Well, I also got hooked on those Clan of the Cave Bear, Jean Auel, whatever her name is.
Yeah, I never read those, but my mom loved them.
Oh yeah, no, they were. You would actually like them because you're an animal lover, I know. So. Yeah.
So.
We digress.
Yes, as we do on Thoughts on Talks, deep dives and digressions. That's what we're all about. So what would you want to tell people who aren't sure that they want to get the book? What would be your closing thought to say what it shares and what it...
Well, I would say this, that if you're actually thinking about it, then it's only $10. Just buy the damn thing. Right? And if you don't like it, I know once you start reading it, you're going to go, oh, I know someone who could use this. I know everything that's in here. And you might. But I know someone else who could use this. I know someone who I've tried to talk to about this stuff. And, it's hard to find the language, I think, to talk about metaphysics in everyday language.
Yes.
I really do.
And that's really, I think, what this book does for the world, is that it takes metaphysics, this sort of esoteric set of ideas, and puts it into a drill and wood and hammer and nails and work that we do every day for our lives, that we can connect the two and make our lives a spiritual experience.
Well, because they are. Right?
Yeah.
When we can find the spirit in ordinary ways, in ordinary living, then we have an extraordinary life. Really.
Yeah.
Because it just attunes it to something else that's beyond keeping the commandments. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's beyond the acts of piety and all the other stuff that denominations often require. But it really is the juice that inspired the denomination to start itself way in the beginning. And that really is the sweet spot. All
right.
That's where we want to hang out. I think this will get you there. It'll certainly start you on your way. And and like I say, it was not meant to be a deep dive, but it will certainly be enough to get you curious enough to go looking for a place who think like you do.
Mm-hmm.
And they're out there. They're called Centers for Spiritual Living. They're called Unity Worldwide. They're called
Ministries, yeah.
AGNT, Associated New Thought Network.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for folks who think like this, we're actually all over the place.
Yeah.
We're Father Leo Booth says that, religious science or new thought is the religion that everyone believes in but doesn't know exists. Do you know Leo Booth?
It sounds familiar, but I'm not getting a picture in my head.
He's an Englishman. He's a Unity minister, actually.
Oh, okay.
And he started out as an Anglican priest, and pretty amazing. He actually has written several books. One about, I suppose you would say the morbid, how religion, there can be a morbidity to religion and abuse in religion. So anyway, very clever, very funny. He has a great bit that he does off of the story of Rudolph.
Okay.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and of course he extends that as a metaphor for anyone who's marginalized in society in any way.
Interesting.
Oh, the dude's brilliant. Leo Booth.
All right. But first read this book, and then you can go looking for Leo Booth. Here. There it is.
Well, where's your book? You have a book as well.
Oh, that is not a conversation for right now. But if people want to look, it's called Echoes Across Time. It's a spiritual adventure, fictional, feminist novel. And I wrote it when I moved to Sri Lanka and published it in 2006. So it's been a while. And I have notes for the follow-up to it that I just haven't finished. So at least I finished one book and it's out there. It's available on Amazon.
It's amazing how much, this book is it's less than 100 pages. It's amazing how much work even a little book takes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why it's always exciting to see it in print with a cover and your name, and it's real and it's out in the world.
You can take that away from you.
That's right. All right. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on this episode of Thoughts on Talks. And if you have any questions, maybe you'd like to send them to Reverend Mike at cslgh.org, or you can send them to me, she@malenadawn.com. And, we'll see you around. Check us out at cslgh.org. You can see Sunday Talks, find our YouTube channel, watch Reverend Mike's noon resets.
Right.
And today's was
go on our YouTube channel and look for Spirituality and the Recovering Redneck.
There you go. All right.
Thank you. Bye. Happy Labor Day.